Amidst the dark waters of Guadalcanal in World War II, the USS Helena's silhouette was illuminated by the occasional flare of distant explosions. The Pacific theater had become an increasingly challenging battleground, with the Japanese forces proving to be desperate adversaries. The Helena's anti-aircraft guns roared to life, their fiery muzzles aiming skyward, trying to fend off the relentless Japanese Aichi D3A dive bombers. The challenges of modern aerial warfare were evident. Traditional anti-aircraft artillery often felt like a game of chance, with the odds heavily stacked against the gunners. A direct hit might occur in just one out of some 1,200 anti-aircraft projectiles fired. The Allies were in dire need of a game-changing weapon, something that would tilt the balance of the war in their favor. Against this backdrop, the USS Helena was about to deploy a brand new technology, developed at the price of over $1 billion, and the details of which were known to only a select few. As the crew prepared to fire their top-secret round, a question lingered in the air. Would this secret weapon be a turning point in war? The advent of World War I saw the first use of aircraft for military purposes. Their role evolved with the conflict, eventually leading to direct air-to-air combat and air-to-ground attacks. At first, they were relegated to a reconnaissance and direct artillery support role, gathering intelligence about enemy positions, taking photographs for future operations, and evaluating the damage done by friendly artillery against the enemy forces. As aircraft roles evolved to more offensive operations, ground armies had to develop cunning ways to take them down. Machine guns and anti-aircraft batteries were the answer, but they were ineffective. Machine guns had limited range, and anti-aircraft shells had to score a direct hit to be effective. The detonation was induced by direct contact, an altimeter to detonate at a specific altitude, or a timer set before launch. World War I artillery struggled to score direct hits on aircraft, even during low-level runs over fortified positions. As expected, the odds of striking a flying object at higher altitudes and faster speeds became more difficult. The same occurred with time and height-triggered anti-aircraft artillery shells. The gunners had to be extremely accurate and time the shell to explode at the desired altitude or time. Despite their combat experience, staying accurate under combat situations was not easy to achieve, especially when anti-aircraft batteries and AA positions were under attack by aircraft and artillery. During the post-war period, the world powers began studies to make anti-aircraft fire more lethal and effective. In the early 1930s, with Germany's rearmament and the rising Third Reich, the Heer and Luftwaffe sought to develop a fuse for bombs and artillery shells. Still, the project dragged on, and progress was only made until late in the war. N.E. Dilley states in Chapter 1 of the World War II Proximity Fuse, a compilation of naval ordnance reports by the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, that, quote, "In ordnance terms, a fuse is that part of an artillery projectile which detonates the explosive charge. An ideal fuse would detonate the shell at the most favorable position to inflict maximum damage on the target." The Germans aimed to devise a fuse that automatically detonated an explosive device within the shell when it was close to the intended target. The Japanese Empire also experimented with the fuse, but only tested it near the war's end before the surrender. British scientists did the same and commenced tests of some fuse prototypes. Progress was made on the project, but cost overruns and unsolvable challenges surfaced when the British attempted to conceive miniature components of the fuse and figure out logistics for mass production. The Spanish Civil War and the Second Sino-Japanese War gave the world a glimpse of a new age of air warfare by introducing fighters such as the Mitsubishi Zero and the Messerschmitt Bf-109. It became evident that these new monoplane designs' speeds, heights, and maneuverability would leave available anti-aircraft guns ineffective. With the war at its doorstep, the British decided to share their research with the Americans to develop an effective artillery fuse. Consequently, in 1940, the U.S. government founded the National Defense Research Committee, or NDRC, to serve as a nexus between the Pentagon and the National Academy of Sciences. Renowned MIT engineer and inventor Vannevar Bush was appointed the head of the committee, with President Roosevelt's approval. Bush immediately got to work and created sections tasked with several components of the fuse to properly distribute resources and objectives as a possible war with Japan escalated. Bush and the committee assigned physicist Merle Tuve to Section T of Division A of the project to fully envision a proximity fuse for large-caliber artillery. By early 1941, Tuve cooperated with the National Bureau of Standards to extend the fuse to bombs and rockets. The immediate problem the committee and Tuve faced was developing an artillery shell fuse that could withstand acceleration shock when shot from a gun and the high rate of rotation in flight. The secondary problem of the committee was narrowing the type of proximity fuse the engineers sought to develop, be it either acoustic, radio, infrared, photoelectric, or electrostatic. The U.S. Navy also wanted a proximity fuse for the 5-inch .38 projectile, the Navy's Mark 12 standard anti-aircraft gun. The radio type of projectile fuse soon gained momentum, leading Section T to drop entirely the progress made on other types of proximity fuses and focus their efforts on that one. By this point, the Luftwaffe bombing campaign in the United Kingdom was raging on, and the British urgently required new and more effective ways of countering enemy aircraft. Despite holding their ground, the British Army and Royal Air Force were exhausted, and command urged the U.S. Navy to share their advancements. The U.S. Army also entered the project. Thus, it was decided that the Navy and Section T would solely focus on a projectile proximity fuse, and the Army would do so with proximity fuses for rockets and bombs. The British began working in Canada and shared their advancements with the Navy. Nevertheless, due to the Navy's advances, in May 1961, Tuve tested 6 fuses that were placed in bombs and dropped over water with great success at the Naval Proving Ground in Dahlgren, Virginia. It was only a matter of time before they did so with the artillery shells. The first successful attempt at the projectile was VT Fuse Mark 32 for the Navy's 538 gun. It had a length of 12 inches, a diameter at the base of the ogive of 3.3 inches, a threaded length of 0.6 inches, and a weight of 6.81 pounds. It was made of a steel base ring, a black lucite plastic nose, a steel body cylinder, an aluminum nose cap, or a metal button tip. According to a declassified Bureau of Ordnance publication about VT fuses from 1946, quote, "This fuse was designed to initiate detonation of the round at the most advantageous point upon approach to a target, when passing within the maximum influence radius of about 50 feet. Burst heights above water for all mods without the wave suppression feature were high at most ranges, averaging 130 feet at 12,200 yards in the 5-inch .38, with burst heights varying widely between rounds. The fuse was used for anti-aircraft fire from a minimum range of 600 yards. The Navy VT fuses would explode when getting within a set distance of a target, maximizing the damage to the aircraft and its operating personnel through the fragments, which would disperse over a wide area. Army tests focused on howitzers employed against light equipment, especially on exposed and entrenched personnel. In April 1942, Navy proximity fuses were employed against a full-scale airplane target suspended beneath a balloon. It functioned effectively. In August 1942, other Navy projectiles were employed aboard the cruiser USS Cleveland. The test drones were taken down satisfactorily. Full-scale production of proximity fuses began at the Crosley Corporation in September 1942. Early production faced numerous difficulties, but satisfactory material was eventually produced. The produced fuse was designated the Mark 32, and it was delivered to the fleet between November and December 1942. In January 1943, the first Japanese plane was shot down using proximity fuse projectiles fired by the cruiser USS Helena during an engagement between Imperial Navy dive bombers and an Allied task force. Proximity fuse development focused on creating an anti-aircraft fuse for British Navy projectiles. The challenge was to adapt the existing Mark 32 fuse to fit the smaller diameter of the British projectiles at the nose end. Work began to shrink down the size of the Mark 32 fuse accordingly. The original British requirement for this fuse included an adjustable self-destruction mechanism to prevent duds from falling back around friendly installations. A mechanical clock was designed to incorporate the self-destruction feature to meet this requirement. Consequently, the mechanical design of the British fuse, referred to as the Mark 33, differed somewhat from that of the Mark 32, although the fundamental assembly of various parts remained similar. However, the progress in developing the self-destruction clock was slow, leading to the eventual abandonment of the idea. As a result, the British Mark 33 fuse was ultimately produced without the intended self-destruction feature. Despite this modification, the fuse continued to be used in British Navy projectiles, proving effective in anti-aircraft applications. Work on the British Mark 33 fuse ran parallel to developing the Navy's Mark 32 fuse. Contracts were awarded to the Radio Corporation of America and the Eastman Kodak Company for producing these fuses. In May 1943, an emergency program was initiated to resolve the remaining issues with the Mark 33 fuse, aiming to achieve satisfactory production by the end of the summer. By September 1943, the fuse was produced more efficiently and deliveries were made to the British. The Mark 33 fuse was specifically designed for the British 4.5-inch gun used on aircraft carriers and intended to work with the British 5.25-inch Navy gun. Another fuse, the Mark 41, was developed for the British 4-inch gun on destroyers. The Mark 41 was smaller in size compared to the Mark 33, as the 4-inch projectile did not have enough space to accommodate the Mark 33 fuse while leaving sufficient explosive content. The design of the Mark 41 fuse was similar to the Mark 33, but it featured a newer fitting with a mercury switch for arming delay and relocated fire condenser in the amplifier section. A smaller model of the Mark 41 was later developed and was termed Mark 45. The new fuses began to be employed in 1943, and according to Vannevar Bush, they were critical for destroying Japanese kamikaze attacks in the Pacific Theater. The accuracy of the Navy's 5-inch artillery fuses saved the lives of thousands of sailors against the unwavering spirit of the Imperial Japanese Navy and its fleet of fighter aces that sought to destroy Allied ships, whatever the cost. In Europe, radar-controlled anti-aircraft batteries with the new fuses were credited with destroying some of the first German B-1 rockets launched against England. During the conflict, Japanese and Germans suspected their counterparts were employing these fuses, but never fully knew if they were employing them across the Western Front and the Pacific Theater. The American artillery pieces employed during the Battle of the Bulge in late 1944 were also credited with accurately targeting enemy infantry formations. When the war ended in Europe, the artillery pieces were supplied to more American and British units.